Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Good morning. Welcome to the fourth week of this ongoing online course where we are trying to understand and reduce the GHG emissions, especially focusing on scope 1 and 2 emission reduction through building design and construction. This is the overall, if you look at it, lecture 16, and in this particular lecture we are going to be looking at the India specific GHG programs. So far what we have done in the previous week, we have looked at the GHG protocol, the ISO standard, we identified the boundaries, how and where to identify the boundaries, organizational, operational. Within them we also identified where the emissions are coming from, and then after identifying the emissions and preparing an inventory, we went forward to see that where to act and how to act, how to reduce those emissions is what we have seen as a broad overview. And then we in detail we looked at the scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions, we understood that, we looked at the challenges in addressing them, and then we saw several examples of the projects where we identified, we saw how they have identified scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. So, this is what we have done in the previous week. Now, moving forward from here, we want to specifically understand how India is responding to this GHG protocol. The entire world is talking about reducing GHG emissions, and we have seen the Paris Agreement, and India has committed to turn net zero. So, how is India addressing and pitching in this GHG program is what we are going to see in today's lecture. We will look at the India specific GHG program, the standards and guidelines that they have developed, and also some of the calculation tools. We will continue discussing about India specific GHG program in tomorrow's lecture also, where we will see more emission calculation tools. So, beginning with this lecture today here, we are starting with India GHG program. So, India GHG program, if you look at the website, and you will get all the links here on the screen, the slides, and you can always go to these specific links and find out more information about it. I am giving you an overview here, we are discussing the overview. So, this particular program, India GHG program, it was launched in July 2013, and it was developed by 3 organizations. One, WRI India, Confederation of Indian Industries, and the Energy and Resource Institute, the TERI. So, it is an industry led voluntary framework which helps us to measure and manage the greenhouse gas emissions. So far it is helping, as an industry led organization, it is helping the government of India to reduce the GHG emissions, and also simultaneously helping the corporates and business partners, business members to reduce their GHG emissions, helping them to account for it and also to report it. And they are following the GHG program of India is following the GHG protocol and the standards, the international one. So, it is totally building upon the same existing GHG protocol, but it has fitted itself to respond to the Indian corporates, Indian businesses and the Indian environment. It basically builds a comprehensive measurement and management strategy. So, basically when we are looking at this GHG emission, this GHG protocol, right from the beginning, we have been talking about the accounting and reporting. Now, reporting will come after the accounting has been done, and accounting itself is slightly tricky. First, we have to know where all the emissions are coming from, and then we have to accurately measure them. So, I might be knowing that okay, I am driving a car and my car runs on petrol. So, I am making this activity of transporting myself using my car is creating some emissions, it is leading to some emissions. That is the first part of it, where is it coming from? But the second part is how much, the absolute measurement. Now, it cannot be measured from car to car, we can't continue to run around with a lot of meters and measuring instruments. So, there has to be a standardized methodology, some standardized calculation tools which are an average of how much emission on an average a car would be making. That kind of calculation tool is needed to accurately know, in close proximity, to know how much GHG emissions are happening due to one particular activity. This is precisely what India specific GHG program is doing, and you can visit the website. And this program, as we have just talked about, is an industry led voluntary program. So, it was supported by a lot of NGOs, a lot of bigger organizations, but largely industry driven. So, we have Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation. So, Shakti supported the creation of India GHG program. The German Federal Ministry for the Environment supported it, the Nature Conservation and Nuclear Safety, and Firozshah Godrej Foundation. So, these were the 4 large funding partners, and it was implemented, executed by the other 3 organizations as we saw. Overall, if we look at the commitment of India, we have seen that there has been an initiative and an intent of India as a nation at large to reduce the GHG emissions, to reduce the emissions of pollutants from different sources. They could be industries, residential, energy, all that. So, the intent is to reduce the GHG emissions, or that is one, or the secondary is to sequester them, to capture them and remove them from the environment. Both ways, the commitment and also a strategic support is needed. That is what is being provided by India GHG program. Now, when the program was created, it was with a smaller pool of members, and gradually a lot of members have joined, and which is a very good sign, because it is gaining momentum. It is a very progressive thing that is happening, and lot of industries, companies, corporates are joining hands with India GHG program. So, a lot of companies, including almost all sectors of industries and companies, automotive, aviation, telecom, cement, chemicals, manufacturing, financial services, information technology, consumer services, agribusiness, textile, and a lot of other voluntary members, they have joined this program. So, if you look at the wide array of the member companies who have joined the India GHG program, we will find some of the very large corporate groups of India who have already joined the GHG program, and they are committing themselves towards working collectively towards the reduction of GHG emissions, and in that process developing the standards, developing the calculation tools, providing a lot of data to be put together, and then developing the generic tools is what is happening with the help and support of all these member companies. If we look at the volume of business which is handled by these members under the India GHG program, it is a significant portion of GDP, and it contributes to around 300 to 360 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions. That is around 15 to 25% of India's total emissions. So, we are really looking at a huge percentage of India's emissions to be handled through only the member companies of India GHG program, and it is not all, but we are looking at a very, very large percentage, and if we are able to address 25% of the total emissions, and if we are able to reduce them significantly, we will be closing in, we will be reaching the goal of India becoming a net zero emission country. Now, with that background understanding of India GHG program, the India GHG program specifically aims to establish a robust and effective institutional setup, which has to provide access to one, internationally recognized and locally relevant GHG measurement and accounting tools. Now, that is the most significant contribution of India GHG program, which we will see in subsequent slides, to provide internationally recognized and locally relevant GHG measurement and accounting tools. Those of you who are already working in the GHG emissions sector and are familiar or have tried to calculate GHG emissions for smaller processes or for a smaller component, you would know that it is extremely difficult to have the average values of emissions for a specific process or an activity. And this is what India GHG program is trying to do through its working groups, working members, and which is what we will see. The second one is to customize training and capacity building initiative. So, to handle and to take this intent forward of India becoming a net zero country, we need a lot of trained professionals, and India GHG program has been training professionals. They have conducted several training programs and they have trained hundreds of professionals who are helping take the India GHG program further. Then, to provide relevant industry specific best practices, benchmarking data and analytics. Since a lot of industry members are showing support and are having trust in the India GHG program, and this we had also discussed as a challenge, that when the industries have to report the data, their emissions, the transparency is needed, and the industry also has to have the trust in reporting, so that there is no plagiarism, there is the confidentiality that is maintained. Now, this is what this India GHG program is enabling, where the members are coming together, they are putting together the best practices, they are sharing the best practices, they are putting together the benchmarking standards and also analysis. So, averaging numbers, that how and where how things are happening and what is the average numbers that we are getting. Then it is also providing an expertise on appropriate goal setting and voluntary targets for different industries, and they are also supporting with business solutions to facilitate GHG emission reduction. Since it is a core group of experts working around GHG emissions, so corporates and businesses, industries who are seeking advice in terms of reducing their GHG emissions. So, that is also being provided by India GHG program. So, this is the aim and these are the objectives of this program, and what do they do? So, they basically put all these objectives together, that is development of customized tools, training and capacity building, policy engagement and peer engagement. So, policy engagement as an objective we have not seen, but when they are developing the customized tools, they are developing the standards, they are coming up with average numbers, they are helping the government towards policy making, towards policy engagement, and that is what, despite being an industry led voluntary organization, they are capable of doing, and they are helping the government in moving forward. So, if we look at each of these specific ones, so if we look at development of customized tools, we will see that they develop the customized measurement tools and also identifying the approach to calculate or measure the GHG emission. So, for each industry to calculate it, there could be several methodologies and there could be several approaches. So, they are developing the customized tools for each of this specific approach. Training and capacity building we have already discussed, and peer engagement. Since their member base is increasing, which we have seen, and a lot of best practices and experiences are coming together, are being shared. So, that is where it is making the progress faster by the peer engagement. And why are a lot of industries, corporates, businesses coming and joining India GHG program? Because it is a win-win for everybody. The nation has committed, India as a nation has committed to become net zero, and all the businesses and corporates gradually will have to reach that level, especially the bigger corporates will have to reach that level where they support the government's intent, and gradually they have to fall in line, even if it remains voluntary for the coming decade or so. So, the corporates have to do it, they have to demonstrate that they are reducing their GHG emissions, and this is a platform where they learn and contribute simultaneously. So, it is a co-learning model that India GHG program has developed. That is how it becomes more engaging and more rewarding for the members. And then policy engagement. Now, what are the outputs? We are looking at standards and guidance. So, there are several standards, there are 4 and they are interlinked standards, and they are coming directly following the GHG protocol, but they have been customized for Indian environment. The second one is calculation tools, measurement and calculation tools. The third one is the resources. So, several resources, they could be in terms of knowledge resource, or they could be in terms of measurement and accounting resource. So, several resources are also being developed. So, looking at standards and guidelines, there are 4 separate but linked standards. The first one is project accounting protocol and guidelines. The second one is for product lifecycle accounting and reporting. The third one is corporate value chain accounting and reporting standard, that is largely focusing on the scope 3, the indirect emissions, and the last one, which is the corporate standard, is for corporate accounting and reporting. So, these are the 4, they are interlinked. Sometimes all 4 might be in use, sometimes one might be the prominent used one, but it might be taking excerpts or recommendations from the other standard. So, that is how it is currently working. Now, looking at the current scenario of climate change and how India is responding to it and what are the challenges that India is facing, very simply putting it in numbers, the World Bank has studied and has estimated that India will need approximately 70 to 100 billion US dollars every year till 2050 to meet the current and future climate adaptation needs. Now, that implies, if we look at the climate adaptation needs, that implies rebuilding of infrastructure in case of severe climatic events, or providing for health and services for people. For example, extreme heat may cause fatalities. So, catering to the population needs, all of these are coming under the climate adaptation needs, and we need approximately 70 to 100 billion US dollars every year, and currently we are only able to spend 4.4 billion US dollars. So, there is a great deficit. Instead of spending so much, we can also look at, and the world collectively is looking at, reducing the GHG emissions to reduce this adaptation need for all the countries and specifically for India. Also, we understand that India is a growing economy and it is one of the biggest economies in the world today. So, anything that we do, if we are reducing our GHG emissions, it is going to contribute significantly to the overall GHG emissions across the world. So, that is why India has taken step forward, it has committed to reduce its overall emissions, and hence this India GHG program is helping towards it. And the corporate sector can play a significantly large role, because one, to continue the economic growth, we need the corporate sector and the businesses to flourish, but at the same time they are also responsible for a large part of the emission that the country has as on date. We have already seen that they are responsible directly for 15 to 25% of GHG emissions plus the energy emissions that are there. So, overall approximately 38% of greenhouse gas emissions in India, they are coming from energy generation and industrial and commercial users. So, that is the industrial and commercial users are consuming about 76% of this energy, that is what we are talking about, and then we have residential and other sectors as well. Overall, if we are looking at addressing the businesses and corporates, businesses and industries, if they become responsible and they reduce the GHG emissions significantly, the overall GHG emission reduction target of India will be easier to achieve, is what we are understanding through this particular program. So, besides these standards and guidelines that have been developed by India GHG program, they also have developed some very robust and useful calculation tools. So, what they are really doing, they are easing the whole process of accounting and measurement. So, for example, I am a smaller industry, I am an industrial group, a company. Maybe I have a very small blast furnace that I am owning, single industry. I am aiming at reducing the GHG emissions in my industry, but I do not have enough resources to dedicate towards research or to hire the consulting services to know where all the emissions are happening and how can I reduce that further. I can invest in reducing the emissions, but accounting and measurement is the first step that I need to know. So, that is what is being supported by these calculation tools. So, for any industry, calculating the total amount of emissions, there are several steps to that. There are multiple processes put together in an industry, and for each process there are multiple steps. Here they are, the India GHG program is putting together working groups and they are establishing these steps for anybody, any corporate to follow the relevant standards. So, each of this tool, it is a collection of large data set, best practices, and then they have benchmarked the data, averaged it out, at the same time all throughout following with the principles and guidelines of GHG protocol. So, and then they have developed these tools which are also tested by the industry experts, not just the working group, but the industry experts are testing them and validating them, and that is how it is available to people. So, if you look at the kind of tool sets that they have developed, there is a large variety of tool sets which are there. Industry specific, for example, aluminum. So, specifically for manufacturing of aluminum, the kind of emissions that are happening, what all, from where and how much is what we can see in these tools. For example, manufacturing of cement. So, there is a specific tool set for cement industry. For example, iron and steel, pulp and paper, refrigeration and air conditioning equipment, semiconductors, wood products. So, for each of these sectors, they have been able to develop tool sets. There are multiple tools within each tool set kit for an industry, for a sector. So, that is what they have developed. I am just taking you through some of them to give you an idea of how these tool sets are working and what all is covered. For example, this adipic acid tool. So, it is basically calculating the amount of nitrogen oxide emissions from adipic acid production. So, if we look at the simplified equation, it comes to the NOx emissions as a resultant of adipic acid production, and this emission factor is the biggest contribution of India GHG program. One can, this equation looks very simple. One can know that okay, the emissions, the NOx emissions are directly related to the amount of acid, adipic acid that is being produced, and there must be some emission factor. But how is this simplified equation coming and what all is going in these emission factors? So, they must have gone through several steps. So, adipic acid is produced in multiple steps. So, through each of these steps, what all gases are released, or if we are specifically looking at NOx emissions here, how much of NOx is produced in each step. So, emission factor for the total 1 unit of adipic acid produced is the emission factor that we are talking about here. So, this is what they have estimated, and so we have the production in metric ton units which each industry can put very simply. Emission factor is given, and then we also have the account for if there is certain percentage of emissions which is abated, which is sequestered or cut off by reduction technologies and practices. So, this emission factor is the standard emission factor. But if certain company has already gone ahead and put to use certain emission reduction technologies already in place, so the fraction that is reduced is the fraction that is abated, which has been accounted for here. And then the utilization factor. So, for this fraction abated, maybe that the technology is not in use full time, it is only during certain times of the day or during the process that it is utilized. So, putting the utilization factor. Now, overall if you see, it looks a very simple equation, but putting in place the emission factors and identifying the reduction technologies and practices which can be accounted for in this fraction abated is what the background work that has already gone into development of this particular tool. Now, if you look at this primary aluminum production and the carbon dioxide and other emissions that are resulting from it, we can see this is the basic flow chart, the decision tree, and we would also see where all the emissions are happening. And through this basic flow chart, further are linked several detailed equations, each process resulting in certain kilograms of carbon dioxide or any other gas, and then their equivalent global warming potential. So, the oval or their carbon dioxide equivalent is how we are calculating the GHG emissions. So, this is how the tool sets have been developed. Several tool sets, for example, for ammonia they have developed a tool set, for iron and steel sector they have developed the tool sets, and also not just one single approach, there are several approaches that are there. For example, here there are two approaches that have been used. One approach is by estimating the amount of iron and steel that is produced, and the other approach is to know the quantities of reducing agents and blast furnace additives. Either ways, the calculations are going to come the same, but depending upon the ease of data procurement, and industry can go with any of these approaches. So, for each sector and the tool set, there are different approaches that have been used, and that is what we will see in the tool sets here. So, and then there is a tool set for cement, again two different tools for calculating GHG emissions from cement manufacturing, and this is such a vast resource that we are talking about. It is putting together a lot of data together in one place and then putting to use. So, if we are talking about life cycle calculations, if we are talking about greenhouse emissions, all of that requires this data. And almost 2 decades back in our country, we had very little of this data that was available, and today this is a huge data set that we are talking about, and it makes the overall GHG emissions calculation and then reducing the GHG emissions much easier with the help of these tools. So, we have for transport emissions, for power sector, and there is also a corporate tool which is called a do it yourself GHG accounting tool, which the corporates can use. So, for some sectors they have already developed the tool sets, and for certain other corporates a do it yourself GHG accounting tool has also been made. For transport emission sector, we know that this is one of the significant contributing industry which is contributing significantly to GHG emissions, and it is also carbon intensive compared to certain other industries. It is also highly carbon intensive. Within that, there are 3 distinct programs that have been developed, one for air, the other one for rail transport emissions, and the third one for estimating the road transport emission factors. Now, when we are talking about, look at the vast amount of data that they must have put together, they are putting together. For example, we are talking about say air transport emission factors for passenger travel and material transport. Now, when we look at the air transport, we are looking at variety of airplanes, the manufacturers. We are looking at the fuel consumption and the emissions resulting from that. We are looking at the services which are going in. So, not just the air travel, but it is all the services on ground which are supporting the air travel, all of that is put together. So, what the process that they have used is to identify and to formulate a working group. For example, here for India specific air transport emission factor calculation and development of this particular toolkit, they have put together Jet Airways, Delhi International Airport Limited, Airport Authority of India, IOCL, SpiceJet, Aramex. All these companies, they are the working group members, they were the working group members, and a lot of data from different sources was put together to come to this number that we are looking at here. It looks a very simple number, but it requires comprehensive calculation. So, we are looking at for India 0.121 kilogram of carbon dioxide per passenger per kilometer, or so that is what we are looking at, a simplified number. Now, as a corporate or for example, as an academician in a university, I have to report scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions tomorrow. If I have to do that and in my scope 3 I have this a particular head where I am accounting for the international travel or even national travel through domestic travel through air for the employees, for students, for academic purposes, all I need to put in this particular head is how many people travelled, what was the distance that they travelled through air, and put this simplified number and I will get the amount of GHG emissions. I do not have to go back and calculate GHG emissions for each activity. This is what this entire program has enabled us to do. Similarly, there are these specific rail transport emission factors, and if you look at the working group, again we have Indian Railways, which is running the entire railways in the country, National Thermal Power Plant Corporation NTPC, and also IOCL, which are supplying the fuel. So, these 3 working group members have put together the number, and here again what we are seeing, the for passenger transport in non-suburban areas, it is coming to be a very small number, but this much kilogram of CO2 emissions per passenger per kilometer, and for suburban areas it is coming out to be this, and for material transport this is the number. So, if I know, again taking the example of an academic university, if my employees, students are travelling by rail, I know how much emission is being put into the environment, it is being released into the environment, and the same is with the road transport. So, for road transport emission factor determination, ACC Limited, Tata Motors, Bajaj, Hero Motocorp, Ashok Leyland, all big companies, Mahindra and Mahindra, NTPC, IOCL, they have all been part of the working group, and a lot of data has been put together to come with these, to come up with these numbers, simplified numbers. Different types of cars, different types of 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, freight vehicles. So, different types of vehicles and also bus, and all we have to do is we have to identify the right type of vehicle and know how much was the distance that was travelled, and this is what we will get, which is identifying specific vehicle type, the total distance covered, multiplying it by this simple emission factor, and we will get the GHG emissions. So, this is the activity that we are talking about when we say that we have to clearly develop the inventory and calculate, account for the GHG emissions that are being released by each company, each corporate. So, this is what India GHG program has enabled us to do. Similar tool set is available for power sector and another one that I was mentioning, do it yourself GHG accounting tool. So, any corporate can use this tool. So, it is available in Excel based format and also a web based format. There are different activities that have been given as prospective inventories, and then you can select the exact inventory type that is relevant to your business, and it gives you certain emission factors, and you can put in the data and get the resultant GHG emission factors. So, I will stop here discussing about India specific GHG program today, and we will continue this discussion further in tomorrow's lecture. Thank you very much for being with me. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.